On episode 27 of Chit Chat, we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of dice and board games. There are some bad ones, but there's also some great ones that are built around dice. We're about to talk about the ones that work, the ones that don't, and some of the games we've been playing, whether they have dice or not. Welcome back to Chit Chat. This is episode 27, if you can believe it. And if you're looking at our main camera right now, you're going to notice something different. We've got Ryan, who you know. We've got me and Jeremy. But sitting in this week, we've got Tony McRee from
Rolling Dice and Taking Names.
Yes, you've done that before, haven't you?
Okay, usually I only get to say the first two words of the things.
Yeah.
Keep rolling dice.
And Taking Names.
There you go.
I blew it again. I blew it. I was on their podcast recently, and I totally blew the outro.
Yeah, outro. But that's okay.
But I rebounded.
But thank you so much for being on it. I really do appreciate it. And gentlemen, thank you so much for inviting me into the incredible Man vs. Meeple studio.
Hey.
You're welcome.
Woo!
You're welcome.
Is that goosebumps? Oh my gosh.
It is. We get that a lot. We get that a lot. It'll go away.
I got to settle down. I know there's a lot of expectations here, and I can feel it. I feel the energy coming.
Yeah.
So,
high energy.
High energy from Ryan.
Which is great, always.
I mean, yes, settle down. It's okay.
Yeah, no, right?
All right, thank you.
Not at all a subdued person.
But seriously, thank you for being on when I was on vacation, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, we're glad we could. It's kind of, like I said there, it's kind of like a little content creator exchange program that we're starting here, I think.
An exchange program.
Yeah. So anyway, speaking of rolling dice, and not so much taking names, we're going to be talking about dice games, or games with dice today. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about who won our contest last time, Maiden's Quest.
Contest winner time, David Colpron, like Voltron. You won Maiden's Quest. Just make a comment below. Or email us, actually. That's probably the easiest way to get a copy of the game. And then, of course, we're giving away Junk Orbit, which is right next to this. Is from Renegade Games. Make a comment, you'll be entered to win.
Yeah,
that's
and we'll try not to ridicule your name.
What? Colpron, Voltron.
All right, dice games. And more specifically, not just dice games, but any game with dice. We're going to talk about, do we like dice games? Do we like games with dice? Are there games with dice that we like? Are there games with dice that we don't like?
Yes.
When do they work? When do they not work? Those sorts of things. Ryan, we'll start with you, and then Tony, prepare, because you're going to be next.
There's a lot. What question am I answering? So first of all, I don't like dice games. Like, if you call a game a dice game, that sets a certain expectation in my mind that, like, I'm just chucking dice and, like, that's the game, right? Like, I think of Yahtzee and games like that when you say a dice game.
Would you say, like, Strike?
Yeah, but, like, Strike is a different beast altogether. Or games like King of Tokyo. I even can enjoy King of Tokyo. But generally, if something is a dice game, I don't
know. There's a whole genre of roll and writes that are built around.
Well, see, but a roll and write, that's a roll and write, right?
See, it's truly
a dice game.
It's interesting. It comes down to, like, your perception of what you think of as a dice game, right? Because, I mean, and we'll get to a lot of these, but there's been a lot of games that I would call dice games in the last year that I really, really enjoy. But like you, I don't think I would list dice games as one of my go-to genres.
I mean, when you're comparing it to, like, roll and rights or dice placement or dice drafting, I mean, there's so many different styles of game that use dice in certain fashions, but like, straight up, like, King of Tokyo style dice chucker is definitely not my personal cup of tea.
So what would be a game that you dislike, if you could name just one specific game even, that uses dice in some manner? What would you say is like, no, I don't like those type of games?
Well, I mean, this is going to be very basic, but like a game like Risk. A game where your strategy and planning can be completely undercut by unlucky or bad dice rolls. Like, I just don't have any desire to play a game like that, where if my strategy is good and I can mitigate the dice in some way, sure, then like Twilight Imperium is another kind of 4X style game where there is a lot of ability to mitigate those dice. And like, if you plan correctly, you can go into a fight and win even if your luck isn't great.
So is it the dice that you don't like and the luck associated with dice? What if I were to replace those dice with cards and you're drawing card numbers? Would you not like Risk then? Or would you like Risk? It's no longer a dice game by your definition.
If it's a set deck of cards and you know the cards that are out and you know, like, for example, we've seen games like this, and if you have a deck of 52 cards and I know that Jeremy's only got 5 cards left, I can kind of guess what his combat strength is going to be. At least you can kind of predict that.
Yeah, there are different ways of changing mechanics that way, but I think, and Jeremy and I were talking about this earlier, it kind of comes down, to me, when dice are treated as a binary thing, where I'm rolling, and either it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I'm either going to succeed or fail. Those are the games, or that's the way that dice are used that I don't generally like. Particularly, like you said, when I've planned this, I've planned this, I've planned this, it all comes down to this, but you know, and then you
there's no
random
satisfaction there.
Yeah, the random. I don't mind randomness in games, but when you put a lot into something and you're rolling, let's do it like you're flipping a coin, right? And you're like, oh, I guess it didn't work out this time.
That's so funny though, because there's a lot of people that love those type of games.
Ameritrash games are built around that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge following, but there's a lot of people that love the excitement of like not knowing if the thing they're going to do is going to succeed or fail. I'm not necessarily one of those people. Some games might be more fun than others, but there are people that I've seen, even when they lose a die roll, they're like, oh man,
almost
that was
every
crazy.
miniature games, even the popular ones like X-Wing and
have the dice.
All those Imperial Assault.
You play a lot of those types of games, right? Miniature games, and you like dice games. From what I hear.
love dice games, and I enjoy the risk that's involved in it. Sorry, I know that was okay. But anyway, yes, I love the dice games, and I can understand where some people do not like the random, the sudden outcomes, that you've built everything up to that final big attack, and you just roll in a miniature game all ones, and it's useless.
Yeah, but how does that make you feel when that happens to you?
It makes me feel like, well, crap, this stinks. I hate this.
Yeah.
But then again, that's nothing compared to the euphoria I feel when I succeed. When I do roll that a massive crit or that incredible roll, and I'm like, yes, I willed those dice to come up with that number so I could win. The force was strong with me this time.
When it's a success, it was because of you.
It was because of the luck. The luck was on me, and yes, I enjoy all those games. I enjoy the quickness of a dice game. So from my standpoint, yes, Strike, y'all go ahead and make fun. Yeah, I love Strike.
Actually, I like Strike.
Okay.
I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
I was new to it just this last year when I first tried it, and then at your Gen Con meetup, the big tourney, I really enjoyed playing Strike. It is not the kind of game that is my go-to or any of ours, but I enjoyed it and I don't know that there's another game aside from Yahtzee that would be regarded as the quintessential dice game.
Well, I think the game built around it too is meant to be just a euphoric, fun game. There's not a real structure. Not like Risk where you're building this giant army and hoping something happens. It's just rolling dice.
It's one of those things when you lose, you're like,
And Strike's like 15 minutes max.
Yeah.
So in games like that, sure. But like when you spent 2 hours positioning your units and playing your upgrades and getting everything, and you build this pool, and then you lose, like, there's a high risk, high reward, and some people really like that.
Those games are not for me. And something you just said too that I want to comment on with a specific game example. A game that I think does it really well, which rewards you, like you said, but mitigates the penalty of failure, is Raiders of the North Sea. Because Raiders of the North Sea, when you go up into those fortresses when you're attacking, you can generally go up there knowing, okay, I can at least achieve this. But you're always rolling dice as well. But when you do, it's all about a good success. Oh, I got just enough to get that third tier of reward instead of the second or the third or the bottom tier of reward. But at the worst case, you're still getting what you know you can get.
Another game that's even more complex than that is Too Many Bones, where they take the dice that you fail at. All of your failed dice go into your column here, and then you get to take some kind of special power from it too. So again, it's using those failures for really cool
Champions of Midgard does that too.
Well, they do with the expansion, right?
With the expansion,
So that's a good one to bring up, because that's one of the things I didn't like about Champions of Midgard when we first played it. But when they had the Valhalla expansion, makes it so that you can basically use your failures for another form of economy. That was a brilliant idea, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think for games like that, like you were talking about levels of success, I think that's the way I like to see it handled. Because if I know I'm going to go into combat with you, and every one of my soldiers is going to do a damage, and I can kind of predict that, but if I roll well, they're not, like, I might do more of my soldiers might live, then at least you can plan for failure. And I think that's something that's important for me in a dice game is, like, I know at the bare minimum I'm going to get X, but maybe I'll get Y if I roll really well. And that speaks to me personally.
But what about a game such as, and correct me if I'm wrong here, which I'm used to having Marty correct me all the time.
We'll
so please jump in. I believe it's Space Base. where the dice you're trying to slot out and build that engine that's coming from the dice. What about those types of games?
See,
I love those games.
Yeah. That's a great example because that's a game that came out this year that I would easily call a dice game.
Absolutely.
And that one for me, I think the trick there is you're never feeling utter failure. Every time the dice roll, you're usually getting something. Maybe on someone else's roll you're not getting something.
No, you're always getting something. Always.
That's true.
Yeah, well, even on everyone's roll, you're always getting something.
You have to have put the cards above your board in the right spaces. So he could roll a 4, and if I don't have 4s or 8s... or
on other players' turns. Not
on other players' turns. On your turn, you're getting something for sure. But the fact that you're controlling kind of like where you're stacking your numbers, like if I want to stack heavy on the 12, because that's the kind of gamer I am, and I want to like hit that 12 and hit it big, that's great. But that was your decision, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, you could do everything in the 6, 7, and 8 and get something every time, but it's not going to be really good.
That's the difference between that and Risk, where it's a win or a loss.
Exactly. It's not binary.
It's not binary.
I often compare games like Space Base, and another one is Dice City, and I'll compare those to another popular dice game, Machikoro. And in Machikoro, you can get your turn, roll the dice. I didn't hit any of my numbers. I passed the dice along. Yeah. But Space Base, you're always getting something. Dice City, you're always getting something, and like that game has a ton of mitigation, which you could pay resources to even like change the number on the dice and like do things like that. So Space Base is a great example, I think, of one that does it really well.
And what about Sagrada? So I mean,
yeah.
Well, see, now we're into a different genre.
That's a whole nother thing, and it's definitely sort of another. Those are the dice games we all love. Those are in our wheelhouse. And I don't mean just like Sagrada, which is built around dice, but like all of the games like Grand Austria Hotel.
Yeah, Marco Polo is my number one.
Marco Polo.
Lorenzo.
He loves Lorenzo.
Lorenzo.
Pulsar is another great one.
Pulsar.
Pulsar. Yeah. The Euro use of dice, and this is kind of an interesting topic because a lot of people have been soured on dice, and like people who are traditionally Euro, I think at first was like, wait a minute, there are dice in it? But it's interesting because we've seen all the games like we just mentioned, games like La Granja too, where you're drafting dice, where someone rolls the dice and everyone together at the table is dealing with the same situation, and you're like, okay, which one am I picking? Totally different situation.
Well, those dice aren't purely deterministic. Like, there's a heavy degree in all those games we mentioned that have a large degree of mitigation to the dice that can be done throughout the turns. Not just in what the dice are rolled in that given point, but being able to use those dice, turning them over, flipping them, re-rolling, doing a lot of different things with those dice. There's other games besides those ones you mentioned, like Trois, and I always go back to Trois. Trois, in my opinion, is the best, the quintessential best dice game ever made. Because of the fact that when you roll those dice, you're looking at your dice, but you're also looking around the table at everyone else's dice, because you can buy those dice from other players and use those dice, and then use those dice in a very unique way by purchasing, doing simple math, division and whatnot, to be able to power special abilities. So there's that aspect too, where it's not just a roll and see what happens, it's the roll, borrow, buy, and then do something with those dice that manipulates a tableau of cards in front of you.
And I think what you just said has it, because it's not roll and find out what happens. Because there's games where it's like you take an action, you take the action, you roll the die, oh, I didn't roll well, I don't get to do the action. But in a game like Grand Austria Hotel or Trois or Marco Polo, you know the die you're taking, you know the action you're putting in, and you know the effect.
Right.
It's not like I'm choosing in Marco Polo or Teotihuacan to go to a market and then I have to roll the die and hope I hit a number.
Yeah,
like, I already know what I'm getting when I put that die there.
Yeah, the dice are really more just determining what resources are available or what actions are available. It's a very different sort of thing. And you brought up Pulsar a second ago too, and we've talked about Castles of Burgundy. Castles of Burgundy, and the difference between it and Pulsar is that Castles of Burgundy, you are rolling your dice, and there are times in Castles of Burgundy where you really want certain dice, or maybe you don't want certain dice, and you might get them. But like you said, there's workers, which you could pretty much mitigate that to the nth degree. Whereas in Pulsar, I think it's even more interesting because you're rolling all the dice together, but then they also added the draft.
Yes.
I look at Pulsar as almost like a drafting version of Castles of Burgundy in a way, because you can do so many things with the dice.
And those games are still random, so you might have something you want to do, but then when you roll that giant pool of dice, your number you want isn't rolled. So you can't just do whatever you want. You still have to adjust your strategy.
Yeah, it's tactical
based on the die roll, but you're never in a situation where you just can't do anything, right?
But what about the granddaddy of them all, Catan? I mean, there it is, the game that everybody kind of harkens back to. I mean, that is pure. I'm rolling 2 dice, and if the 7 comes up, I'm pushing my luck. Everybody loves it, but based on what I'm hearing from you or everybody here, Catan, maybe not.
I think Catan serves a great role. I think it gets, like me even, it was one of my big gateway games into heavier games, and like I'll always respect Catan. It's for me, it's not till you gotta do the expansions that like I'll never play without the expansions, because you're right, the base game is just like I put my city here, and if I'm on an 8 and an 8 is never rolled, then tough luck for me.
I mean, that game definitely is susceptible to those moments where you're like, no one's rolling 8s. This sucks.
I think that's why. I think that's why Catan has that stigma for more enthusiast gamers.
Yeah, right.
They found those other games that allow the mitigation and the more Euro aspects to it. That I mean, Catan's great for what it was, but yeah, you're exactly right. 8's never rolled, and
designers have evolved it to where there's so many games now that use dice in a pure, such a way that almost can't be criticized. I mean, there are some games out there where I don't know if I'd change a thing about how the dice are used, because there's nothing about them that even seems random other than the initial roll, but then every one of the tables having to deal with it. It's not like you have an advantage that I don't. We all have the same dice that we're looking at in many cases.
One other game I'll mention briefly is Coimbra, which I thought was a very unique way to use the dice, for the fact that you're looking at pip values
and colors
and the placement where they are on the board. So that was a very unique game too.
And the way that so the colors apply here, the numbers apply here.
Beautiful design.
Brilliant.
It is.
And you look at the game like they're like,
two different things.
Why wasn't that thought of years ago?
Yeah, I love
amazing
games that
they're
use
still
dice in
finding
interesting
aspects.
ways.
But you mentioned miniatures, but what about role-playing games where the dice are there? That's, I mean, you've got the storytelling and the outcomes.
I feel the same way about role-playing. And you guys, everybody here knows I'm a huge role-playing gamer. I mean, that's what I do for my day job even, is in the role-playing game industry. And I hate dice in a lot of role-playing games. There's nothing more frustrating in like a game like Dungeons & Dragons, waiting 20 minutes for your turn to come back around, getting ready to do your big attack, and then rolling like a 1 or a 2 and like.
I think that could be frustrating, but I also can see where a good dungeon master is able to facilitate those things and turn those failures into something.
Yeah,
well, that's where that dungeon screen comes in.
That's why there are a lot of role-playing games I don't play. Like there are definitely role-playing games I gravitate towards where dice are done in clever, unique ways, like the Star Wars Edge of the Empire role-playing game, where even on a failure you can still use your dice to do cool things. Like it's simple, like Dungeons & Dragons Pathfinder. Yeah, any game, even a board game, where it gets around to you. You roll a die and go, well, I guess I'm not taking an action this turn. Like, that's just frustrating for me.
Yeah, so we'll finish off on this topic before we talk about what games we've been playing, but I wanted to say one more thing. Just dice in general. One thing I love is a game that has nice, chunky dice.
Dinosaur Island?
Well, like Dinosaur Island. And even if a game doesn't use the dice that well, it's a component in and of itself that's always very appealing when done well. Like the Destiny dice, actually.
Yeah,
like,
nice.
Those are
Seventh
really
Continent
cool.
Dice are awesome.
Yeah.
Seventh Continent dice.
The bone dice.
Seasons, one of my favorite games.
Seasons
that has
dice.
the biggest, chunkiest dice ever. And it doesn't get a lot of credit for using dice as well as it does, but you're drafting them. And then there's that one dice left over that has an effect that doesn't get drafted, kind of like Pulsar. But I mean, do you guys feel the same way? About dice? I mean, there's
definitely some games that feel better rolling the dice.
And I always go back to my original, the fun game, the strike for me. But when you pick up those big, chunky strike dice, there's just something about that tactile feel. That's kind of like Potion Explosion with the marbles. Here, when you have those big, heavy dice, it just feels good. And like I said, you've willed those dice, but then again, when you hit the D4 on the floor and you step on it, that's always a beautiful thing too.
You haven't willed nothing; it's pure luck. You know that.
I know that. I don't care. You can burst my bubble all you want, but I did.
I feel that way too, and I think that's part of the reason why I don't even enjoy winning those games. Because like, if I beat David because I rolled 5 6s in a row and David rolled 5 1s in a row, I don't feel like I outplayed David. I feel like I just got luckier on the dice than David.
Well, let's be clear: you never outplay David.
Oh boy!
Wow.
You often outplay David.
Let's talk about the games that we've been playing.
Yeah. Speaking of outplaying David.
I'll start first, and I'll just say one game. The best game I've played this past couple weeks is Silk. It's a game from Devere. It's a very confrontational game. You are farming silkworms. It's super weird. Totally abstract in the way that it plays, but it's super fun. You're moving your farmers around. You're moving these mastiffs, which are dogs. And then you have an okami, which is this bad creature that eats your silkworms. and it's just purely abstract and super confrontational.
Yeah, very mean.
It is pretty mean, but for a mean game, I liked it pretty well.
I liked it a lot.
It was really cool, and I do like the fact that it's weird and not just like sheep and dogs and farmers. It's this weird theme, and the artwork is very reminiscent of a Miyazaki looking type film.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun game. I'm going to talk about an old game. I played CODENAMES DUET last weekend.
Interesting.
Hadn't pulled that off the shelf in a long time. That game is so good. Like even CODENAMES, we don't give it. It's such a great game, and it's got such a high profile in our industry. But
it's hard. Is it still hard for you?
Yeah, we played probably 4 times and only won on the 4th try. Although we run really well. That game's all about having the duet version in particular is about having a really good first round or two. And I started with a 3-word clue that we nailed, and then Alicia got a 2-word, and then we got a 2 and a 2. So we had set the bar pretty high, so we could have coasted actually. Yeah. Our last 4 turns, we could have just done 1-word clues, but we tried to do a little bit better. We had one of the little tokens left that we hadn't even flipped over by the time we won it. But yeah, we played that, and then one game that I haven't played lately, but it's sitting right over there off camera that you can't see that I'm dying to play, Carpe Diem.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
We got a copy of the new.
I think we got it up here.
Oh yeah, we got the box lid up here. This is the newest one from Stefan Feld that I don't. It's an Essen release,
it's an Essen release. It's out in Germany right now.
Yeah, I think it's available in Germany right now, but I've read about it. I watched a video on it. And I cannot wait to play that game.
And you're doing Chit Chat, and we have this sitting here.
I know. Yeah, right?
I'm here. And,
so let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up so we can play some games.
Listen, I don't know if you heard, but I was on vacation for 3 weeks.
Did you play any games?
Well, one good thing about dice games is when you're on a cruise ship, and they're easy to pack. So we got in Knockmall, got to play that. We loved playing that game. And then Crisscross Grail games. So we were playing those while we were either waiting for the trivia show to start up, or the next big thing that was happening at the theater, or the buffet to turn over. Well, one of those events had to occur on the cruise ship. But before then, the biggest game I think we've got to play is Wildlands.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
So we've played Wildlands, and then next episode of Rolling Dice and Taking Names, we're interviewing Martin Wallace.
Oh, that's right.
So he's coming on the show, and I wanted to bring up. He mentioned something to me to go back to the dice, is that he feels, and I can understand this, that dice can sometimes break the immersion. If suddenly you're having to roll dice and look at tables and investigate and compare numbers.
Makes it a game.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's just like, I was like, well, that's very interesting. Some of these, it's kind of because I always love the dice games. But basically, those were the games I got to play. Like I said, was on ship, visited 3 game shops in Europe, and I walked away with nothing. So I did. My wife was proud of me. So anyway, Ryan.
Well, we finally finished Detective.
We did.
We played through all 5 cases of Detective. Probably post a review here soon. Crazy, I don't want to say too much, but crazy experience. Just unlike, for positive or negative, unlike any other game you're ever going to play.
Yeah.
So that's good. And now that that's done, we're finally able to start our Near and Far campaign with the Amber Mines expansion, which I've never used. Add some really cool things to Near and Far.
It's nice that we're starting at the ground level.
Yeah,
with
starting back over from map 1 with Amber Mines and going through the whole campaign.
I'm really glad that, I mean, as you know, and I've mentioned, I've been playing Near and Far for a little bit with Alicia and her son, and the fact that you guys have it back on the table now too, it's really cool to see an old, not really old, but a game that's been out for a little while come back into our spotlight, if you will.
I think when you have a really good expansion like Amber Mines, people are going to want to go back and bring the game back out, right? Like that was a big motivation for us to get back and play it.
Yeah, we haven't used Amber Mines, but I'm looking forward to trying that this weekend.
It's really good.
It's really cool.
Really good. Kira's off camera. She's like, It's really good. All right.
So that's it for episode 27 of Chit Chat. Let us know what you think of dice, or what your favorite dice games are down in the comments below. And until next time, we'll see you later. Well, that's another episode of Chit Chat in the bag. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out another one, there's probably one right over here in the bottom left-hand corner, or probably your right-hand corner. Whatever corner, we have something to click on. So click on one of these things and good things will happen.